So, welcome everyone. We are just onboarding all the participants. It will take a few seconds for everyone to join from the waiting rooms, and then we will start. So, today we are having our next session of our Pitch and Match webinar series, which is a webinar series from our Invest4Nature project, dedicated to unlocking the funding opportunities for nature-based solutions. And today we are doing it in collaboration with UrbanbyNature, who is from eClear Europe, a platform that empowers local and regional governments to integrate NbS into their urban planning. And also we collaborate with Task Force 3 of Network Nature Plus, which explores NbS in finance and investments and connects projects on nature-based solutions. And today we are looking at an NbS pitch from Poland, from Katowice. And today it's about a therapeutic green pavilion, which is designed to support the well-being of patients, staff, and visitors at a psychiatric center. And after a short presentation of the NbS case, we will hear from our investment sector perspective to see how this NbS case can get matched with funding. So we are exploring what kinds of funding could be an option and how the case could be positioned to attract those options. And today we have two guests here, Wioletta Mlocek, who will present the NbS case. She's a senior administrative officer at the Municipal Greenery department in Katowice, and she contributes to the development and maintenance of urban green spaces and is actively engaged in NbS projects such as Upsurge and Just Green. And her work supports the creation of more sustainable, resilient, and livable urban environments. Welcome, Wioletta. And also, also I welcome Linda Romanovska, who is partner and founder at Melomys Advisory. She's a highly regarded senior expert on climate change, sustainability, and sustainable finance. She's co-author of Climate Change Policies and several sustainable finance and corporate sustainability reporting frameworks, and has also had leadership roles at PwC, RSM, and Matera. And she is also a doctoral researcher at the University of New South Wales. My name is Lydia Lienhart. I am an economist at Joanneum Research in Austria. I'm focusing on climate change adaptation and nature-based solutions. And I welcome you to today's webinar from our Invest4Nature project. Before we get right into it, a few housekeeping rules as well. So the webinar is being recorded, just so you know, and you are very welcome to ask your questions in the chat. And you're also very welcome to tell us who you are and where you're from, which organization, in the chat, so we know a little bit more about you. And in this regard, let's get right into it. I will now hand over to Wioletta.
Hello. So just quickly introduce myself. I'm from Poland, Katowice. I work in a municipal greenery department. I'm involved in some European projects such as Just Green and Just Green. And today I represent the Green Meeting Space project in Katowice. This project was developed, this project was developed by the Psychiatric Center in Katowice, directors Adrian Gancosz and Dr. Marcin Burdzik, together with the Municipal Greenery Unit team, myself, Magdalena Biela, and Lech Marek. Today I want to show you something very concrete, how a small investment can change psychiatric care. Next slide, please. So first the problem. I want to introduce you Dr. Krzysztof Czuma Psychiatry Center in Katowice. It treats 1,500 to 2,000 patients per year. Yet there is no outdoor therapeutic space, no green infrastructure, and no social interaction zone. This directly affects recovery. Patients with anxiety or social disorders lack space to rebuild interpersonal skills, which prolong treatment, patients need more medication, and the recovery is much harder. Why does it matter? We already know. This is evidence-based. Nature exposure reduces stress, shortens hospitalization, and reduces medication use. But it is still not standard in psychiatric care. This is a high-impact, low-cost gap in the system. Katowice-Szopienica district is an ideal candidate to serve as a pilot location for investment due to its rising international visibility. This is largely driven by the popularity of the Netflix series Lead Children, which, following its premiere, trended on #1 in 57 countries worldwide. Next slide, please. So now the solution. We propose a simple, scalable model, a modular therapeutic green pavilion, not just a structure, a system. This is one structure with 4 functions: therapy space, social interaction, green roof, and rainwater system. It works clinically, socially, and environmentally. So how does it work in practice? It's one system built around 3 zones: a therapy zone for individual and group sessions, a social zone for rebuilding interaction, and a green zone improving microclimate and comfort. The structure is modular, so it can be expanded or relocated. So for the impact, we expect around 5% shorter hospital stays, less medication, better social functioning, and lower staff burnout. These translate directly into cost savings. The solution is based on evidence and not assumptions. We know that nature exposure reduces stress, accelerates recovery, and lowers medication use. We translate this evidence into clinical practice. But why does it make sense? Because the impact is clinical, operational, and financial at the same time. Shorter hospital stays means lower costs. Less medication means reduced spending. And better working conditions mean lower staff burnout. And all of this is measurable in ESG terms. This is not a one-off project. It is a model. So we already identified multiple locations: 4 psychiatric centers, 2 in Katowice, 1 in Skoczów, and 1 in Kamieniec in Poland, and 1 geriatric hospital in Katowice, with even more potential sites. So one pilot unlocks many implementations. So for the legal status and ownership, the land belongs to the Silesian Voivodeship, and it is managed by the Dr. Krzysztof Czuma Psychiatry Center. So all approvals are secured, and there is no administrative risk. For the financial model, 3 clear phases in 6 months with a total investment of 30,000 euros. We begin with phase 1, the concept, focused on design and planning, budgeted at 5,000 euros. Phase 2, construction. It is the core stage where 20,000 euros is allocated to building and implementing green systems. And finally, phase 3, scaling, uses 5,000 euros for communication and promoting the project. Altogether, it is a streamlined one-time investment designed for efficient delivery and future growth. The financial structure is clear and transparent. First, total investment costs approximately 30,000 euros. About about 15,000 euros per module. And the second, operational costs, green maintenance, approximately 2,000 euros per year, and infrastructure service, approximately 500 euros per year. But these costs are covered by the operating partner, meaning no ongoing financial burden for the investor. This project is measurable from day one. We track 3 areas. First, health outcomes, hospitalization time and medication use. Second, environmental impact, rainwater retention and biodiversity. And third, cost per patient and staff absence. All data is reported and benchmarked across sites, which makes the project scalable based on real data. We are looking for one partner, an external investor. We are not looking for loans and we are not looking for debt. Preferred model, direct investment or funding for implementation. This investment reduces system costs, improves patient outcomes, and delivers measurable ESG impact. The site is ready, the approvals are ready, and the team is ready. We are only looking for one partner.
Perfect. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for your presentation,
Thank you.
Wioletta. It is a very interesting project and definitely something that is relevant for many places across Europe and the world. And now I welcome Linda to say hi and give some feedback and your thoughts on this. And I want to mention at this point, obviously this pitch and webinar series is much more than just those 60 minutes we are here together. It also involved some preparation, and so we had already some previous talks where we already had some feedback rounds. So it is important that this series is here to really help shape a case to be more finance ready. And now over to Linda.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And thank you, Wioletta, for presenting this. It's quite exciting to see that hospitals are willing to engage with nature-based solutions and recognize their benefits, especially for mental health, which I think is such an underserved area in general. So congratulations on that, and happy to help figure out, how can we best attract the right financing for this. So I will first start with some clarification questions, because of course, when I put myself in the shoes of someone that could be providing funding for this, I'm thinking of what questions will they ask after your pitch. And so I will be asking some of those questions. And of course, if you can answer, do answer. If not, then that's something that you can take a note as something that you might want to think about in the future when you may be making other pitches. So first, I will start with the bigger picture questions. As someone who's potentially considering partnering and be the investment partner, I would really need to understand the ownership structures, not only of the land, you spoke about the land, but also of the hospital itself and all the operations. It is not always the same. Hospitals can be private, public, they can be state managed, national government managed. So it would be good to know what the situation is with the hospital. And is it different between the different sites that you presented, or do they have the same ownership and operation management structure?
So for the hospital, it is of course a public hospital. It is owned by the Silesian Voivodeship, so the same as the land. So all of the hospitals are public, and the lands are managed by the Voivodeship. So they are in our use. So we know we can use it, and the permissions are good for the project to run.
Okay, and for the non-Polish people, Voivodeship is the regional government.
Yes.
Yes, okay. But you represent the city, do I understand that right? So what's the relationship between the regional government and the city administration?
So the city and the Voivodeship, we are cooperating. So if we would like to do something in in the land or the property that it is managed by the voivodeship. We ask for permission, and we get the permission from them.
Yeah, right. Okay, and you said that the permissions are already sorted. They have already given you permission to do this. Is that right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so that, and also just to confirm, you said that the running cost, so 2,500, did I know that right? I was trying to make my notes, would be covered by the hospital itself. So it would be
Yes.
the state government that would provide funding for that, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and that's a normal part of hospital operations. They are used to taking care of the territory and would simply add a couple of.
Yes, they get the money from the government, and also we, as the Greenery unit, we can also help with the maintaining of the Greenery. So it's gonna be in cooperation with them.
Okay. And then just to further clarify on the cost, so you are presenting that the first pilot would be around 30,000 or 30,000, of which construction phase is 20,000. It was not entirely clear to me why the later projects would only need 15,000. If you could explain a little bit, how is that justified? Why is the subsequent sites so much cheaper than the first one?
Because for the first one, we also need can I get the previous slide?
Yes.
So here the concept is 5,000 euros. So if we get the concept first of the green systems and everything, we wouldn't need to get the concept later on. So the cost is gonna be lower because of it. So it's gonna be only the construction. And so the 20,000 minus the 5 is 15 per this construction. So that's what we thought for the ongoing constructions for other sites.
Mm-hmm. Maybe that's a note, something that to be a bit more clearer in a deck typically, because here it looks like 20,000 is the build, and you would always need 20,000 for building, and design is separate, right? It's not within the 20,000. It's great that the next ones are cheaper. That's great. Generally, it's probably just good to be really clear on that. And then I'm trying to also understand what is the total opportunity. So the minimum is 30, because some partners may be interested in bigger scale, right? And they may not be interested to only do one. They would be interested only if they can do all of them. So what is the total if we count that first one is 30,000 and then other ones are 15? And how many additional ones was it? 5 or 4?
It was 5, yeah.
5. So we have 5, so we have around, I'm just trying to calculate in my head, around 75,000, so around 105,000, right? The total opportunity. So that's another recommendation. Do put that in the slide, because people will be interested in different scales, and some may be willing to do just one thing, and maybe then you have 5 partners for each hospital, a different partner, but there will be bigger organizations that are not really interested in small scale, and they will want to know, okay, what's the maximum we can do here, right? And so it's always to present that as the total opportunity as well. Okay, so then you also presented that the financial benefit is also 30,000. Do I understand that right? And could you explain how that benefit was calculated? How did you come to this 30,000?
So
This is not the ask. There was a benefit, sorry, not on this slide. There was another slide with the financial benefit. If I misread the sum, apologize, but there was another one.
Here.
Here. Yes. So we have that 30,000 measurable impact, which is interesting because if the investment is 30,000 and the impact is 30,000, we are at 0, which is an interesting proposition. So would be good to understand whether that's very specific calculations, or it's more of an assumption based?
So this is we get the data from the hospital, so they calculated it. So if the 5% shorter hospitalization for each patient, and the financial, so the data, all the data was from the hospital. So
So that's probably, again, a note for the future. It's good for you to break a bit down on how exactly did you come to this figure of 30,000 benefit, because of course anyone who wants to invest in this, they want to know, how can we quantify the benefit? And it looks like you can, which is great, but then they probably want to know a bit more detail in terms of what went into this.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So if it's mainly based on, let's say, 5% shorter stays, or it may also be medication costs. So we don't know yet whether it's shorter stays, medication costs. So it could be a number of different things.
Can we explain that cost? Because I think it's connected with our project from the Center of Psychiatry in Katowice. I'm not sure if we talk about this point at this moment.
Yes, of course. Sorry, I just on the screen, it appears the name Wioletta Mlocek as well. So can you also quickly present yourself?
Okay. So we will make it later. Yeah, I guess, because
you're very welcome. You're very
I know. Okay, so you ask about the costs. Yes, the potential benefits which are connected with realization of the project. Yeah.
Yes. And how did you come to the 30,000?
This is
Excuse me, sorry, can I stop you? Can you please introduce yourself, because we're not seeing your real name or your face?
No problem. I'm not so sure how we are described at this conversation. I'm the medical director of the Center of Psychiatry in Katowice, and we sum up the costs based on the data which shows that when the patient's going outside and have more exposure of sunlight, etc., the treatment process of anxiety symptoms, depressive disorders, etc., are going so much well in treatment. So the treatment time is shorter, the amounts of the drug which we need to introduce and use are lower, and the outcome is better. So we also prevent the situation when the patients come back to the hospital short after we end the first hospitalization, for example. So these factors, so the shorter time of hospitalization, the lower risk of the recurrent of symptoms and necessity to come back to the treatment in hospital, and the lower amounts of the drugs lead us to the we have this kind of amounts of the cost, which we maybe have some kind of improvement in this matter.
Understood. So 30,000 would include both the shorter stays and the cost of those stays, and also potentially the cost of medication that you avoid because you prescribe less medication. Is that right?
Exactly. But the main reason which will impact the reducing the cost is the shortening the time of hospitalization, because the drugs are quite cheap, but the cost of the hospitalization for one patient, it's including also food and some cleaning staffs, etc. That's why the total cost of the hospitalization one day, it's the major point here, which allow us to assume that we will be able to spare this part of money.
And did you use any period of time for the calculation? Because I saw somewhere that there's 1,500, 2,000 patients. Is that over a year? Is that a benefit for a given year?
Yes, but generally, these numbers which which we have here, so 1,500 to 2,000. This is the total amount of patients which are hospitalized in our clinic during the year. It's true, but not all of them are treatment caused by the depressive disorders or anxiety disorders, which I mentioned at the beginning. Sometimes we have the schizophrenic process, the psychotic process, but despite, regardless of the medical name of the disorder, if we have a prolonged stay in hospital or long-term hospitalization, few weeks, few months, when we need to place and cohort patients only in the buildings, it's always affect negatively to the course of treatment. So in each of this diagnoses, using this kind of buildings, we could say it, outside the space where we will be able to using to go to the outside with patient to socialization, etc. It improves the treatment process.
Yeah. So is it right for me to assume that this 30,000 measurable impact is actually per year, not total, but per year? So the
Yes.
measurable impact could be much bigger because, of course, the space will be there and will be maintained for a long period of time. So we multiply by 10 years. Of course, the total positive impact is even larger. Okay.
We have
so I would recommend presenting that.
We have 200 beds. So at the one moment, yeah. So at one time we have 200 patients. So per year it's quite a big amount. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's also a recommendation, because your impact could be much larger than the 30,000, presented that way, say this is per year, depending on how many years we can maintain this, and 10 years is reasonable, of course, then, that the impact could be much bigger, and that could be an attractive point for anyone considering funding this. Okay. So then I had another clarification question, which I think you just answered, because my question was, if you put these installations there and these pavilions and green space there, someone needs to use them, right, to achieve the benefit. So my question was, how will you actively encourage the use? Will there be specific sessions where the medical staff will be bringing out the patients, or there will be other ways of incentivizing patients to use the space? And I think I heard it from you just now, right, that you were saying that you specifically intend to bring patients out during their therapy sessions. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so at least we have established that there is a grounds for calculating this impact and quantifying it. There is not only passive use, there's an active use, and it will be encouraged. So we can reasonably assume that the impact can be achieved. Some other questions that I have, I'm just looking through my notes, which are a little bit chaotic at this point. Who benefits? So if we say that there is a 30,000 measurable impact per year, and that's a cost reduction, but cost for who? So who pays for these hospitalizations and this medicine? Is it all government funded? Do the patients pay? Is it insurance, health insurance that's involved? Who benefits from this cost reduction?
Wioletta?
Well, that's gonna be the question for the hospital, probably. Maybe they would better tell what.
Yes, no problem. Can you repeat the question, because we have some disturbance in our internet connection, I guess, and I heard only the last part of it. So
no problem. Yes. So if you say that there is a 30,000 benefit and cost reduction, who benefits from this cost reduction? So in other words, who pays for these hospitalizations and medicine? Is it the government? Which government? Is it the patients, or is there perhaps insurance involved as well?
No, we have the public facility, so 100% of our patients are the costs are covered by public finances, but we function in this way that we achieve a concrete amount of money from our government and local governments to conduct the treatment, and it's we have some limits. So we achieve money which we need to cover all costs of the treatment, and we have too much costs to the income, compared to the income. So if we will be able to spare, for example, 20,000 for due to the fact that we will shorter the hospitalization period, it means for us that we will get the same amount of money from the government, but we will be able to lower the costs. That's why, for example, we will be able to treat more patients than normally, because we will have the free sources, we could say that, to use to help the additional amount of patients which are above the contract, which we have it.
Okay, understood. And again, recommendation, put that in the slides, right? Say, okay, this is 30,000 cost reduction for the hospital. That means we have less cost per patient. That means we can treat more patients, and that's the social benefit. So really, the benefit here is societal benefit. It's a public benefit. It doesn't benefit any private sector entity, which will decide or who might be interested or not. So, and that's good to stress that, and in the future put that on the slides. That's really would help your case as well. Okay, so those were some of my key questions. Let me look through my notes if there's anything I wanted to ask. Okay, so then I will now go to the questions that are about, well, what's the benefit for someone wanting to do this, right, to fund this? First of all, can I confirm that you are absolutely not interested in debt, in lending? Is that the case? So you would not be able to take a small loan for this and repay it because you have cost savings. Theoretically, you potentially could use those cost savings to repay that loan, right? But that's not something that you are willing to consider. Is that right?
From my knowledge, no loan or no debt, because the hospital doesn't really have the money to invest in it.
Well, yes. So that would be the scheme, right? In a debt, you could take the loan, the bank pays for the installation, you have cost savings, and so you can use those cost savings to pay back the loan. And because the cost savings match the cost of implementation, then theoretically it could be done that way. Public entities sometimes cannot borrow so easily in private markets, so there may be other reasons. And you have put here that you're not interested in debt, so I'm just going with that assumption that we're not interested, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because obviously it could be a rather low interest loan, such as a green loan supporting you, but if we're not considering, then we're not considering. Okay. So then the question will be more, because this was not going to be a fund like an equity investor. This is not going to be a bank because we're ruled out those options. A fund is not going to be, because obviously you're not offering equity. This is not something that they can invest and then grow the value and then sell. That's how funds typically function. Or different funds can function different ways, but that's how they operate. And we're really excluding that because this is a public entity. There's no private ownership here. So we're excluding funds and we're excluding banks as lenders because you're not interested in the lending. So the area that we're left with really is more either grants from different authorities, and they could be public grants, or sponsors. So we're not really talking about investors or lenders, we're talking about sponsorship here. And for those sponsors, and we can talk about the grants briefly as well, but the sponsor side will want to know, well, what's the benefit? If I just give this money, I don't expect it back. I'm not investing in equity. I'm not asking for interest rate on this. So there's no real financial return for me directly. What is the benefit that I can get out of this? And one area that I'm thinking of is what corporates often are interested in is exposure, right? So is there exposure that you can offer for potential sponsors where their name would be somewhere placed in the green area. Perhaps you can offer them even more exposure where, for example, they are a company that produces either products or services for mental health or for their families, and they could advertise those products or services and have that audience, which would be their primary audience, right, for their products and services. Is that something that you could offer as a benefit to a sponsor?
Yes, of course. So the exposure for the sponsor would be, of course, the visibility of their company. So of course there would be some the name of the company somewhere near. Also, as we are collaborating with maybe like television or something, we can put the on the on our social media, and as if it's gonna be the first one, the pilot action in our in Poland. So it's gonna be probably everyone would be interested what's happening, and if it's gonna be in a more like the impact is gonna be more so for other facilities as well. So probably people would get interested in it, and the company that the sponsor would get attention from media and from people, and also as if it's the psychiatric care, it's gonna be very, very, very good for the sponsor to show themselves in our country.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So that's general exposure due to comms around the project and their name being linked to the project. Is there anything else you can offer? For example, can they distribute flyers within the hospital for free? Can they put on posters or walls or notice boards or in elevators in the hospital if they have a specific product that they would like to advertise either to the patients or their families? Is that allowed? I know that there can be limitations in advertising in hospitals, but is that something that you can offer them as in the return? So they don't just pay for advertising space, they sponsor the pavilion, but then they get a bit of that additional exposure with some really targeted advertising. Is that possible?
I'm not really sure how it works when it comes to the for the hospital, if they are allowed to do that. Maybe my colleague from hospital could say more, but I would have to look into it more because I'm not really sure at the moment.
Yeah, because I can see how that could be a really, really strong driver for someone to want to sponsor it. That not only they get a bit of name somewhere on a plate and maybe a couple of mentions in television, they actually get access directly to their target audience, which is their potential clients, right? And yes, there can be questions of whether that's allowed, and you need to clear all that and get proper, language around that and ethics involved in that. But that would be my first target in terms of private sector. Who could be interested in doing this? It's not only for this is our corporate social responsibility. We just want to do something good for mental health and for nature, but we actually have a commercial benefit out of this. And then those will be by far the most interested companies to come on as sponsors, right? So that would be my target, but you would need to figure out how much you can offer them and clearly put it on a slide. This is what you get for your 30,000. You get your nameplate here and mentions in here and social media. And this is how many patients will see your advertising every day. And you can put your product there. So that will be really good pitch addition to the pitch, because obviously these will be the primary interested corporates if we discount all the other financing options, right? Now, the other corporates that would may be interested in a more generic sense, right, as they're part of their social engagement, as part of their corporate sustainability or corporate social responsibility policies. Now, Poland, of course, is subject to the EU regulations on that. So that would be CSRD, that would be the EU taxonomy, or the mandatory reporting around that. Only big companies are subject to that reporting. So then we are thinking then you need to target really large ones, right, for this, which probably is reasonable. There are quite a lot of large companies that operate in the health space. So I would certainly think about well, health insurance in certain ways. I don't know how strong health insurance is in Poland. In other countries, it may be bigger. It could be pharmaceutical companies. It can be certain equipment manufacturing, or even larger companies that offer private counseling. So when these patients are out of hospital, they probably want to have some support, and potentially there are private entities that do that. Or sometimes it could be some app developers, some health apps. So there's probably a number of those larger ones that you could approach. Now, the smaller ones are not really obliged on a mandatory basis to report on their sustainability, right? And so the question is, who is ethical without needing to be, right? And that's a little bit the local knowledge in whether there are any local companies that are willing to do that, because it will mostly likely, from the smaller ones, it will be the local ones who want to invest in their local community and their local, mental health. So in that mid-tier, the large ones who are subject to CSRD reporting, for example, the problem with the EU regulations on this is that they only ask for transparency. They don't actually ask anyone to be sustainable. They just tell us how sustainable you are. And primarily what they ask, and that's being even narrowed down right now during the omnibus process, they primarily ask, what are you doing to reduce your own harm directly, right? So if I'm a pharmaceuticals manufacturer, what do I do to reduce my emissions to water of chemicals or air? So they are less focused on asking, what are you doing outside of your operations, outside of your company to do additional good? They can report it, but it's not really the primary focus of these regulations. And therefore, unfortunately, the focus has shifted away from what can we do in a broader community to, oh, we have to focus on our direct operations. So the situation is not the most favorable right now to get the attention. And therefore, I really would try and get the attention of the first group, right? Who can benefit commercially, not just from social perspective. If you really can't find anyone in that kind of really commercial benefit space and you struggle to offer them the advertising opportunity, for example, then yes, try and find the larger ones who are reporting on a mandatory basis, but with the knowledge that it may not be their direct point of interest right now. They will probably come back to that point after the first few years of mandatory reporting. They will have, gotten through the processes, set up everything on the mandatory side. They will start to look back, okay, now we're again have the capacities to do more voluntary stuff. And this is where this would come in mostly. And then the third group is the potentially the local ones that are not, they don't have any obligations to report. They just want to do it on a voluntary basis simply because they're willing to support the community where they operate. So for me, those seems to be really the three main targets. And we excluded quite a few. We excluded already quite a few, right, from private sector, simply because of this being a public entity nature. So I will briefly also touch upon, do you want to comment on that? Maybe do you have a reaction to what I said?
That's a very hard topic for me because I was not prepared for this. So that's a very good point, and we will get the notes for this.
Yeah, and you see how the moment you start being very precise of who your target audiences are, you can design your slide deck, your pitch deck in very specific ways that would speak to them specifically, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you're not looking for lending, no debt, then you don't need to talk about how you're going to pay back, from what resources. If you want to offer someone commercial benefit, then you need to talk about what you get for the 30,000. This many eyes will see your advertisements every day as they pass through the corridor where your advertisement is that we can put up for you. So be very specific.
So sorry, if I may, one comment for this, generally the question more than comment. So I understand if, for example, we as a hospital organize some scientific events which are, for example, addressed for the doctors or psychologists or psychiatrists, and it's also possible to use For example, the sites, the symbols, the information about the cooperation during this kind of events. So it's also quite a good option to make some benefits for the sponsors, I guess. Yeah, because the one way is put the names, for example, of the sponsors in our area, which is allowed by the law. So it's also possible, despite we are the public facility. But the second way for make some improvements for sponsors is make the information about the cooperation to our staff, to medical practitioners, etc. So I guess it's also okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's fantastic. So absolutely mention that of course you may want also talk to companies where their audience, their client is maybe the practitioners, the doctors, the nurses, rather than the patients, right? And there can be different ways of how do you reach those audiences, either through conferences or through advertisement on the site. So yes, so absolutely put all those options in, and then every company can see what the benefit can be for them. Okay, so I'll briefly touch upon grants, because I immediately think, and I am sitting on quite a lot of panels that help allocate European grants to these kind of projects that are practical implementation projects, which is not about research, which we're doing now with Invest4Nature and fantastic work done there. But there are these grant programs that are specifically geared to give funding to build something. Your scale is really, really small. These grants, you need at least 1-2 million, right? So, but if you start combining several sites, there is an opportunity, right? And you say, okay, we can offer 5 sites. You would still need to partner with others. If you can find other partners, right? Preferably even outside of Poland, potentially. So international partnership where you can set up a project where you say, okay, in Poland, in Katowice, we will do these 5 sites and 5 pavilions for mental health. In another country, maybe some other green measures in cities. And perhaps you have some implementation partners. Maybe you have some design firms that help, design and other knowledge partners in that. You could apply for programs, which in my mind, I now think of 2 that could be suited for this in the European context. And that could be the LIFE program. And it could also be urban innovative actions. So there are 2 programs that are really focused on practical implementation, including in urban spaces. And both of them support nature-based solutions. And also if you can link them not only to health benefits, but also nature benefits, perhaps climate change benefits, the more benefits you can articulate theoretically that they could provide funding for this. But yes, that will take time. First, you need to build a consortium. You need to find other projects that you can partner with. You need to write a proposal. There's an evaluation process. It will take at least a year until you get the answer on whether you have been selected or not for that funding. Now, they also do not necessarily offer 100% financing. They offer 60%, sometimes higher, up 80% in some cases. Now, the co-funding can come as in-kind contributions, so your work. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you always need to put money as the co-funding on the table, but you might still need some co-sponsors, even if you get some of that European funding for this, right? So can be considered, but it would be much faster and quicker for you to find a corporate sponsor, to be honest, in this case, right? So that would be my priority. Really, if you struggle to find a corporate sponsor, then I would start considering, okay, maybe we want to partner and do it through European funds. Right, okay. We have a bit of time left.
Thank you, Linda. We have a bit of time left, and we have some questions from the audience as well in the chat. So I will ask them now. There's 3, so I will ask them jointly, and maybe we can get, I think they are all towards Wioletta. So the first question is the monitoring of the KPIs, which you mentioned here, done by the hospital or by Invest4Nature? This is the question. I mean, I can already say it's not done by Invest4Nature, but by whom is done the monitoring? And the second one is, what is the nature of the collaboration between the Katowice Greenery department and the hospital? Very interesting. How did the idea for this NbS project come to be initiated?
So for the first question about the KPIs, of course, it's going to be done by the hospital because they have all the data and all the insights from the patients. So the monitoring would be on their side. But how did we get together with the hospital? That's a good question. We first started collaborating with the hospital through our Just Green project that is from Interreg Europe. So we collaborated with them because the Just Green project is about the green corridors, like health green corridors, and the green policies that we would like to implement in Poland. So we started collaborating with them on this case. We are giving them, for example, onion flowers for the patients to go outside and do some work outside to be closer to nature. And we also had some webinars inside the hospital as well. There were some therapists, and they were saying there were for the patients. So they were doing the speeches about how the nature is good for the health and mental health. So that's how our collaboration started, and we get the idea from the hospital that they would like to have a green space outside for the patients.
Thank you. And this is very good to discuss here because, of course, for other cities, it's also an important point that getting in touch with hospitals is something very interesting for the Greenery department to really get things going and see the potential for projects. There's another question. Are there specific policies in Poland that set incentives for such initiatives? So is there any policy in Poland that could be helping you actually, that incentivizes, for instance, corporations or firms to do something like that, to sponsor such a pavilion?
That is a
Maybe you don't know, but
yes, that's a very good question that we would need to go into because that would help us a lot, of course. I'm not really familiar with any of like the specific policy at the moment, but that's a very good point for us to be more prepared as well.
yeah, I mean the European perspective Linda just gave, so the perspective on what is required and not under the CSRD, which is the most relevant regulation in this regard. And then yeah, you can have an additional look on whether there's a national Polish leverage that you could use.
Yes.
Yes, so I will hand over to Linda for a few final impressions and closing words.
Yes, thank you very much. So very impressed with the solution. I absolutely love that this is being done, that you are thinking about this. And I really, really hope that those sponsors come around and they see the benefit and the beauty of this. Look, there are many more benefits that you can stress. That's my first point here. You really could make this even more attractive. You know, if you talk about, because you did mention biodiversity benefits, we'll talk about it. This many more insects and flowers for bees and water retention, or how much water you can retain, and that protects from floods, or just spell out the benefits even more, the generic benefits and the health benefits. Yes, shorter stay, this many more patients we can serve, because if each patient stays longer, then we can serve more patients, etc. Less medication, benefits people, benefits the hospital. You can also be much more precise on what do I get for those 30,000, right? As I spelled out, because that will convince the finance department of the company. Because the first part will convince the sustainability person in the company, but they will also need to convince the finance department, right? And on those numbers, the commercial benefit will be the arguments for them that they can use internally actually to sell the idea. Because the sustainability person always has to sell internally. And so they need something to tell the marketing person, something to tell the financial, the CFO, something to tell the risk person, because the risk person will say, oh, is this risky? Is there a reputational risk? If we now sponsor this and it fails in some way, is there a reputational risk? So think about giving these people the right arguments to be able to defend this idea internally in the company as well. And yes, and be upfront. And if you say, yep, we're not open to borrowing, just say it. If there's no equity opportunity here, say it. And we're open about this. Don't necessarily call it investment, because investment has a very specific meaning, right? In the investment, in the financial services community, talk about the ask, or the financial ask, or the required funds. You can call it that way. Not necessarily call it investment, because it makes people think that, oh, you want an investment fund to come and participate, right? When you use the word investment sometimes. And really be very confident, about everything that you present as the benefit, because this has a lot to offer. Don't forget that some will look for bigger scale, and don't be afraid to present bigger numbers, right? Don't think that companies will always want to do the smallest possible thing. Some of them think big, and they will not do anything that's below 100,000 euros, right? And you can say, yeah, we have that. We have 5 sites. We can do something for 100,000, right? So be bold in that way.
Thank you so much, Linda.
Yes,
and
thank you for all the comments.
I think your recommendations are not only extremely valuable to Wioletta and the hospital staff managing the projects, but also for everybody who listens now, because there's some key takeaways that are definitely transferable to other projects. And also what I think is very, very valuable to the audience today is your structured approach in going through the funding options. And I think some of the listeners might have been following along, thinking of their own NbS projects. So this, I think, was very valuable, the structured way you approach the potential target audience. And I hope it was very interesting also for our participants. And definitely this provided a lot of insights to me. And I hope it helps bring this project into fruition. And we are already waiting for press releases in a few years' time on the green pavilions then, when they're implemented. So thank you all for joining. This is now the end of the webinar. If you have any additional questions, you can always look at the Invest4Nature website, which we'll paste in the chat, but it's basically, you can also just Google Invest4Nature. In this Invest4Nature project, we look into exactly questions like this. How can we successfully structure NbS to attract financing? What financing options are there? And further insights. And everybody's very welcome to check it out online. And for further questions, also there's a general Invest4Nature email. So you're always welcome to address us. Then thanks to everyone, and have a great rest of the day.